Shun-go wasn't originally meant to be king. In fact, the throne of Oyo already had an heir, his half-brother Ajaka, a gentle and diplomatic ruler. But in a world where kingdoms survived on strength, Ajaka's softness left Oyo dangerously exposed. When enemies captured him, it wasn't just a political crisis, it was a public humiliation. Oyo at the time wasn't the mighty empire it would later become. It was still fragile, a young Yoruba kingdom fighting for survival among powerful rivals. And now, with its king gone, the people's pride and future hung by a thread. Into that chaos stepped Shun-go, the fiery prince, feared and admired in equal measure. His presence was said to carry thunder, lightning, and fire itself. This is the story of how he seized that moment, saved Oyo from collapse, and carved his name into history. Before we talk about Shungo the man, we need to understand the stage he walked into. This was Yoruba land in the 14th century, a region in what is today southwestern Nigeria, stretching into parts of Benin and Togo. The Yoruba people weren't a small tribe, they were one of the great civilizations of West Africa. Their cities bustled with trade, their kings ruled with elaborate councils, and their culture was already centuries deep. At the center of it all sat the Oyo Empire, Shun-go's homeland. Oyo wasn't just any kingdom, it was a rising powerhouse. Its capital, Oyo-Ile, sat on fertile plains in the north of Yoruba land, perfectly positioned for farming, horse breeding, and war. Geography gave Oyo an edge, open savanna to train cavalry, rivers to move goods, and trade routes that connected them to the Niger River basin and beyond. Politically, Oyo was a monarchy, but unlike in Europe where kings often ruled unchecked, Yoruba kingship was a balance of power. The Alafin, the king, held spiritual and political authority, but he was kept in check by the Oyormese, a council of noble chiefs who could, in extreme cases, even remove the king from the throne. Beneath them, local governors called Ajele and district chiefs managed towns and villages, ensuring Oyo's reach extended far and wide. But despite this strong system, Oyo was not invincible. It had powerful rivals. The Nupe to the north raided its borders. Other Yoruba states like Ile-Ife and Ijesha jostled for influence. Trade with the Hausa to the north and kingdoms further down the coast meant diplomacy and warfare were constant balancing acts. This was the political and geographical world Shungo was born into, a kingdom with great promise, but one always under threat, surrounded by ambitious neighbors, and governed by traditions that demanded both strength and wisdom. And in the middle of this delicate balance, a boy named Shun-go would grow up, destined to change everything. Shun-go carried royal and spiritual blood in equal measure. He was the son of Orunmeyàn, a prince whose lineage traced all the way back to Oduduwa, the legendary ancestor of the Yoruba people. His mother, Torosi, was a Nupe princess from the north, a proud people with rich culture and deep spiritual traditions. Torosi herself was a powerful priestess, which meant Shungo grew up with royal authority and spiritual power already coursing through him. Legend has it that the day Shungo was born, the skies darkened and thunder shook the ground, a sign that this boy was destined for more than an ordinary life. From early on, he was fiery, energetic, and unafraid to speak his mind. He challenged the elders, laughed loudly, and could switch from playful to fierce as suddenly as a thunderstorm. He grew up alongside his half-brother Ajaka, the eventual king, whose gentle and cautious nature often clashed with Shungo's boldness. While Ajaka preferred diplomacy, Shungo trained as a warrior from a young age, learning to wield weapons, ride horses, and command respect. But his upbringing wasn't just about physical prowess. He absorbed the rituals, traditions, and spiritual lessons of the Yoruba elite, learning which choices honored the gods and which could bring disaster. The palace was both a school and a battleground. Family rivalries simmered, especially between Shun-go and Ajaka, but the world outside was no less dangerous. Neighboring kingdoms watched Oyo closely, trade disputes brewed, and any sign of weakness could invite attack. These early years forged Shun-go's strength, courage, and cunning, preparing him to answer the call when Oyo needed him most. After the death of Orunmeyàn, the question of succession arose. In Yoruba tradition, kingship didn't always go to the eldest son. It was a mix of lineage, merit, and approval from the palace elders and chiefs. Shun-go, despite his fiery nature and proven courage as a young warrior, was passed over. Instead, his half-brother Ajaka was crowned king. Gentle, diplomatic, and cautious, Ajaka embodied the qualities the palace elders valued: stability, calm, and respect for protocol. They hoped his measured rule would strengthen Oyo from within, especially after years of territorial disputes and external threats. At first, Ajaka's reign seemed peaceful. He negotiated trade, settled disputes, and focused on building alliances with neighboring kingdoms. But this very caution became a liability in a world that respected strength above all else. Warriors whispered that Oyo needed a king who could inspire fear as well as respect, someone who could defend the kingdom with sword and strategy, not just speeches. One fateful day, the Olovu, king of Owu, a rival Yoruba town known for its warriors and cunning, launched a sudden raid on Oyo. Amid the chaos, they struck at the palace itself and, in a shocking move, kidnapped Ajaka. The gentle king, unprepared for such aggression, was taken hostage. The people of Oyo were gripped by fear and shame. Whispers spread. Had their kingdom been humbled? Would they become puppets of Owu? Total disgrace hung over the city. With their king gone, there was only one hope: Shun-go, the younger half-brother, known for his fiery spirit and fearless nature. Word reached him quickly, and he didn't hesitate. Gathering a band of trusted warriors, he set out to confront the Olovu, to reclaim his brother and restore Oyo's honor. When Shun-go finally reached Owu, he did something no one expected. He didn't storm the gates or shout challenges. He walked right up, bowed low, and asked calmly, confidently, for his brother Ajaka to be released. The Olovu? He laughed, loud, big, booming laughter. Then he dropped the demand: cattle, yams, horses, slaves, everything he could dream of. Most people would have panicked. Most people would have run for their lives. But not Shun-go. He just stepped outside, raised his double-headed axe high to the sky, and legend says, well, the impossible happened. The entire ransom appeared right there, like magic. The Olovu was frozen. He didn't even think twice. Ajaka was handed back, safe and sound. And just like that, without a single battle, Shungo had saved the day and showed everyone why his name would thunder across the land for generations. When Shungo and Ajaka returned to Oyo, the people didn't rush to welcome Ajaka back as king. Calm, gentle Ajaka, the one everyone expected to lead, suddenly didn't feel like the right ruler. Their loyalty had shifted to Shun-go, the prince who had risked everything to save their honor from Owu's raid. Shango didn't quietly take the throne. He arrived with the presence of a storm. People tell stories of how the palace seemed to hum with tension the moment he stepped inside. He wasn't just a returning prince anymore. He was the man who had defended the city, restored its dignity, and shown what true power looked like. From that day, Shungo's reputation wasn't just about his birthright, it was about what he had done, the courage and force he brought back to Oyo. Here's how Shun-go actually became king. After the Olovu raid and the rescue of Ajaka, the Oyo Mesi, the seven palace chiefs, started getting nervous. Quick context: these chiefs weren't just ceremonial, they were the kingdom's power brokers, the ones who advised the king, checked his authority, and could even remove him if he got out of line. The chiefs realized something: Ajaka, though rightful king, had lost the confidence of the people. Their loyalty, their excitement, their fear and respect, they were all with Shun-go. He had acted when it mattered, showing courage, strength, and cunning. The chiefs saw this and knew Oyo needed a leader who could protect the kingdom, not just sit on the throne quietly. So, in a mix of political maneuvering and tradition, the Oyo Mesi made their move. They formally installed Shun-go as king, handing him the crown and legitimizing his authority. From that day on, Shango wasn't just a prince who had saved his brother, he was the king of Oyo, the ruler whose presence demanded respect, whose power would soon ripple through the Yoruba lands, and whose name, thunder itself, would become legend. With his double-edged axe in hand, Shango carved his path to power. Every swing was a warning. Strength, cunning, and justice all flowed from him, a prince who would one day be feared by kingdoms near and far. When Shango became king, he had a clear goal: a united Oyo, strong and disciplined, under his rule. He knew that to hold the kingdom together, he needed more than words. He needed an army that could inspire respect and enforce unity. When speaking of Shun-go, one cannot ignore the symbols that made his power both feared and revered. Among these, two stand out: the edun ara, the thunderstone, and the oshe Shun-go, his double-edged axe. The edun ara, often called a thunderstone, is no ordinary rock. Legend says it is struck by lightning, carrying the very force of the storm. To hold it is to hold a fragment of Shun-go's divine power, a bridge between the earthly and spiritual realms. It is a symbol of protection, authority, and a direct connection to the god of thunder himself. Then there is the Oshe Shun-go, the iconic double-headed axe. This is not just a weapon, it embodies balance. On one side, it delivers justice. On the other, it unleashes wrath. The Oshe reflects the duality of Shun-go, a king who could protect his people while striking fear into his enemies. In rituals and festivals, it is more than a symbol, it is a presence, invoking his power and reminding all of the might of Oyo's greatest king. Shungo's reign was not built on symbols alone. Power needs hands to wield it, voices to echo it, and warriors to defend it. To turn his vision of a united Oyo into reality, he needed an elite force, one that would embody discipline, loyalty, and fearlessness on the battlefield. That force was the Esho Ikoyi. The Esho Ikoyi were no ordinary soldiers. 70 elite war chiefs, chosen not for their lineage but for their courage, skill, and unwavering loyalty. They trained without end, masters of horseback riding, weapons, and battlefield strategy. Retreat was not an option. They led from the front, showing the rest of Oyo what it meant to be fearless. The Esho weren't just soldiers, they were symbols of Shungo's vision. Through them, he could bring rebellious towns to heel, form alliances, and ensure that every corner of the kingdom knew Oyo's strength. Their speed, coordination, and sheer presence made it clear Oyo was united or it would face the consequences. Through careful planning, strategic campaigns, and the power of the Esho Ikoyi, Shungo didn't just rule, he created a kingdom that stood together, ready to defend itself, trade, and grow. The unity he forged wasn't just political, it was a statement. Oyo was one, and under his leadership, it would thrive. Shango's first major campaign was against Owu, a city to the northwest that had captured Ajaka. Owu was strong, fierce warriors, thick walls, a city that could crush an unprepared army. Shungo didn't rush in blindly. He planned, scouted, and used clever tricks to break their resistance. In battle, he was unstoppable. The Edun Ara, his sacred drum, shook the earth with thunder and lightning. Armies faltered at its sound, and even the fiercest warriors whispered of his godlike presence. Alongside his double-edged swords, he made Oyo a kingdom that no enemy could ignore. Drums rolled, horses charged, and soldiers shouted in unison, creating a spectacle that unnerved Owu's defenders. Eventually, Owu fell, and its leaders were either integrated into Oyo's administration or sent away. Next, Shun-go turned north to Nupe, a kingdom controlling key trade routes. Instead of brute force alone, he combined military campaigns with strategic diplomacy, ensuring Nupe became a source of tribute and troops. This secured trade for Oyo and strengthened his control over northern territories. Southwest, the Egba towns presented another challenge. Fertile and strategically placed, these towns could be allies or enemies. Shango approached them carefully, mixing displays of power with negotiation. Through this balance, the towns pledged loyalty, paid tribute, and even supplied warriors when needed. Then came Ile-Ife, the spiritual heart of the Yoruba people. Here, swords wouldn't do. Shun-go respected their traditions, offering diplomacy over domination. By acknowledging their sacred role and securing allegiance, he ensured even the most revered city in the region recognized Oyo's supremacy. Through these campaigns, Shun-go's vision became real. Oyo wasn't just a kingdom, it was a unified force, respected by neighbors and feared by rivals. Shun-go's household reflected both his power and the spiritual world. Among his wives were Ayan, Oya, Oshun, and Oba, not just influential women, but figures associated with divine powers in Yoruba tradition. Each had her own spiritual presence. Oya with winds and storms, Oshun with rivers and love, Oba with loyalty and sacrifice, and Ayan with wisdom. These marriages weren't only personal, they strengthened alliances, linked towns to the king, and connected his reign to the spiritual forces of the Yoruba world. Even with such a household, Shun-go stayed focused on uniting Oyo and building a legacy that would outlast him. Together, these goddesses weren't just wives, they were spiritual anchors, guiding Shun-go as he worked to unite Oyo, lead campaigns, and become more than a king, walking the line between human authority and divine influence. Now, let's talk about how Shun-go got his powers. Commanding lightning and thunder isn't something you learn at the Palace Academy. There are a few versions of the story. Some say he was born with it, a divine gift from his royal lineage. Most oral traditions tell a different tale, one that's more epic. Shungo went on a deep spiritual journey. He sought out the Babalawo, expert diviners and spiritual masters. They guided him to Edun Ara, the stones of thunder, said to have fallen straight from the sky, carrying the raw energy of lightning. Through rigorous rituals, initiation, and courage, Shungo learned to call down thunder itself. Other stories say he stole the secret from Gun, the god of iron and war, or accidentally triggered a lightning strike that destroyed his palace, transforming him instead of killing him. Regardless of the version, these stories underscore Shun-go's mastery over the elemental forces. His powers were earned, a blend of courage, wisdom, and divine connection. Even kings have their limits. For Shun-go, the very power that made him legendary also drew the eyes of the Oyo Mehsi. They began to fear him. Too strong, too ambitious, too unpredictable. The stories say they demanded he step down. For a king who wanted unity and justice, it was a blow too deep. Honor and duty weighed heavier than the crown. And so, in a final act of sovereignty, Shun-go took his own life. Some say he drank poison. Others whisper of a ritual only he could perform. But that was not the end. For the people of Oyo and for the universe, this was only the beginning. Shun-go did not fade into history like other kings. Thunder roared across the skies, lightning danced across the heavens, and thus Shun-go became Orisha Shun-go, the god of thunder, lightning, and fire, forever a force of power and awe. Some tales hint he had already touched the divine while alive, that his command over lightning was only a prelude to this transformation. And so his story became more than history, it became myth, a reminder that the line between man and God can be as thin and sudden as a flash of lightning.